I'm talking New Orleans Saints football in the competitive, although not exactly great teams in this NFC South division. People know I'm not a big fan of Dennis Allen. In fact, with of coaches that have 2 or more years of experience in the NFL, and I wait till they have 2 or more years to evaluate them. Dennis Allen is my bottom rated coach, my last rated coach of everybody. But New Orleans finished 9-8 last year, and one of the reasons they did that is because they have a pretty good roster. If you compare them to what's going on with Atlanta, certainly what's going on with Carolina, and to some extent Tampa Bay as well, New Orleans roster stacks up just as comfortably in that area. So let's dig deep now in with the New Orleans Saints as we talk not only about their draft, but where they stood before the draft, what were their hits and misses with the draft, their divisional outlook, their season win total outlook. And I have a lot of final thoughts as far as how the 2024 season is going to shape up. Let's start with the stat sheet. Pretty good stat sheet. One of the very few teams that hovered around 60% as far as allowing opposing quarterbacks, what their completion percentage was. 59.7, number 2 in the NFL. Derek Carr, on the other hand, a very careful passer, 68%, more than 68%. My problem with the offense, very predictable under their previous coordinator, Carmichael, although when they had Sean Payton had a big hand in it. And of course, with better quarterbacking play, perhaps, and more innovation, the Saints were pretty good offensively. But Kamara, the last 3 years, has at best run 4.0 per carry, which is below the league average. Each and every year, it's below the league average. This is either put up or shut up time for Alvin Kamara. I like the fact that Taysom Hill is used in the offense more. He's much more creative. He actually can break off bigger gains. So this is a big year for Alvin Kamara. That's the stat sheet. In free agency, Saints were pretty quiet. They added Chase Young. He's gone through some tests as far as medical tests for his neck, his back, and so on. So we're waiting to see if he could ever put together a full season. They lose Marcus May in the defensive secondary, but mostly comings and goings have been fairly quiet. So as far as the draft is concerned, my top needs were defensive tackle. The Saints are better when they defend the run. The last 2 years, they have not defended the run as well as they used to. They needed somebody right in the middle of the line. Marcus Murphy was available. We'll talk about that at pick 14. They didn't go in that direction. Linebacker, and again, a run stopper, very important. The offensive line, through retirement, through injury, Ramczyk right now may or may not ever play again. It's certainly a career-threatening injury. And also through free agency, the offensive line has lost some of its power over the last couple of years. Losing Marcus May means they need a safety. And for the first time in a while, wide receiver, a little bit low in terms of the overall talent. Chris Olave is a wonderful, smooth, came in camera ready as far as a number 1 wide receiver, but he needs some running mates to go with him. Those were my needs. Tough decision at pick 14. They really couldn't go wrong. Fuenga, he could be a dynamite right tackle. They're experimenting with using him at left tackle. There'll be more growing pains there, but he was a beast as far as the run game and pretty good against the pass at Oregon State, where they played a lot of pro concepts there, and they had a tremendous running back room over the course of the last decade, and Fuenga was certainly a part of that. He's going to be an asset to the offensive line, and there's no excuse if Kamara can't run behind him. The problem is they did not address the defensive line. At first, I was really adamant that they should go with Murphy at defensive tackle over Fuenga. Even though I have Fuenga, my draft range for him was between 12 and 16. So right smack there, appropriate draft range for him. And Murphy was between 8 and 16. So they couldn't go wrong with either guy. in the end, I'm comfortable with jump-starting the offense, which tailed off and needs more creativity anyway. I should note that Clint Kubiak is the new offensive coordinator. This is his fourth team in 4 years. So you wonder, he was an offensive coordinator with Minnesota a couple of years ago. He was both Denver and San Francisco passing game coordinator in each of the last couple of years. Maybe he learned something out of San Francisco. They need a fresh approach on offense anyway. I like McQuisty as a cornerback, assignment sound from Alabama. You can't really go wrong with people from Alabama. Cornerback, you'll see, was not on my need list. This is a futures pick. It tells me that Marcus Lattimore is going to be here one more year and one more year only, and McKinstry will be groomed to take his place in 2025. It's not a great move for 2024, perhaps, because again, we're not addressing the front seven on defense. And that's an area for me. And of course, I wish they would draft safety and wide receiver a little bit more. But you still have a fine player. By 2025, he's a starter. I'm used to New Orleans drafting 5 or 6 players. This is actually 7 players is a lot for the Saints, who have not traded back. Get this. They have not traded back since the year 2007. Sean Payton didn't know how. Post Sean Payton, they don't know how. This is a draft of 2. Let's face it. These 2 players are good players. The rest of the draft, Spencer Rattler, worth a look if they had surrounded themselves with other talent at other positions. He was my next best receiver, next best quarterback after the top 6, but a distant quarterback in terms of ranking. I had him ranked in the 4th round. He was picked in the 5th round, so a little bit of value. I applaud them for going wide receiver, but Bub Means did not receive a draft worthy grade. I believe on my standpoint, on my list, I had about 230 rated players overall. Means to me was a late 7th round or undrafted free agent pick. There were better wide receivers available at this point, 170 in the draft. So I'm disappointed in that. Maybe they'll be able to develop him because wide receiver was a need. The other picks that they had, we're looking at a couple of 7th round grade on Ford, the linebacker. Linebacker was a need, but again, not a value pick. Picking him in the 5th round with a 7th round grade. Christian Boyd needs time, properly drafted in the 6th round. Draft and develop guy who had a private workout with the Saints. And then the last guy, obviously from Eastern Kentucky, he's going to be stashed away most likely on the reserve list. He's practice squad. He was not rated in my eyes. Another guy who probably was better picked as an undrafted free agent. Again, a draft of 2 overall, in my opinion. What did they do? They didn't solve their run defensive problems. They probably didn't solve their wide receiver problems. They probably didn't solve safety. They did a nice job preparing for the future cornerback, and Fuega's an instant starter along the offensive line. So that's pretty much what you got here. My biggest question is, what do I do with a 9-8 record for this team last year with a plus 75 or plus 76 point ratio? Because in general, that means the team was capable of 10, maybe even 10.5 wins. And now you go from an 8 home game schedule to a 9 home game schedule, even though the Saints were only 4-4, I believe, at home anyway. The problem I have is they're probably outscored people, but didn't achieve the 9-8 because of Dennis Allen. How much of it is Dennis Allen not winning the close games because of decisions that he makes as head coach that aren't to my liking? And how much did they perhaps underachieve that the record should have been better? The good news again is Atlanta doesn't draft well. Tampa drafts decently, but again has that brutal schedule. And I'll be talking about Tampa in about 20 minutes, so stay tuned for that one. Go ahead and bookmark that and get to my YouTube page for Tampa. And Carolina has a long way to go. So we're not looking at a dynamite division. New Orleans can get away with a lot of things, but they have to start closing out games. after having a fantastic record, especially with Lattimore dominating Tom Brady and anybody Tampa put forth at quarterback. Lattimore hasn't been healthy the last year and a half, been in and out of the lineup. When he's healthy, they've done very well in terms of how they play against Tampa. They have to recreate that and start winning those divisional games. That's going to be important. Schedule notes. Games 2-5 are rough. At Dallas, home to Philly, and Philly has 32-9 divisional playoff revenge. Not divisional, but playoff revenge. That's usually a powerful September tool. So I'm not going to be backing the Saints week 3, but the Saints need to somehow squeeze out a win. Then they go to Atlanta, toss up games with Atlanta, and then they stay on the road Monday Night Football at KC. That's not going to be fun. Biggest question I have here is, can Dennis Allen survive that kind of game 2-5 stretch? And then later, before they have the bye, they're going to play at the Chargers. No home field advantage for the Chargers, but a very good team. And then at Carolina, the second of back-to-back is always tougher. You'd rather face the easier team as the first of the back-to-back. Then back to Atlanta and Cleveland. Schedule a little bit better. The pacing is very manageable after the bye. And if I'm right, the division is going to be close enough that all these teams, Atlanta, Carolina, not Carolina, but Atlanta, New Orleans, and Tampa, will have a lot to play for the last 6 games of the year. So I look at the season win total, 7.5. I personally think it's a little light. I haven't played the over. I don't play a lot of overs. So I wait in terms of whether or not I feel like playing the overs. But the divisional odds, which I did give out to a handful of people about a month or so ago, was as high as plus 435. And I want to make a comment about that because plus 435 was just too much. I think if you rank it all together, 40% chance for Atlanta to win the division, 30% chance, which is plus 233, in my opinion, for New Orleans, 30% chance for Tampa, which we'll talk about. If I think they're plus 233, their current divisional odds are plus 350, I still think there's value on New Orleans to win the division. Doesn't mean they will win the division. If I give them a 30% chance, it's only a 3-10, but I still think there's value. I still would recommend New Orleans as far as winning the division. And you hope and pray that Dennis Allen doesn't screw it up. And if Lattimore is healthy, Derek Carter, Olave, the new Fuaga at the offensive line, a dynamite run blocker, maybe Kamara, and maybe Taysom Hill, and maybe the new offensive coordinator. They get that offense rolling a little bit. I think they're right in the mix last 6 games of the season. Final thoughts. Basically, really quickly, what will the offense look under Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator? Can running back Kamara, behind this new coordinator and new either left tackle or right tackle, erase a 3-year downturn? I still have concerns at defensive tackle, linebacker, and wide receiver. They're not bottom at those levels. They're just average or slightly below average at those levels. The draft could have taken care of that, but every year with New Orleans, it's a draft of 2. Sorry, that's all we get from New Orleans in the draft cycle. Finally, will Dennis Allen survive the season? Maybe, maybe not. Games 2-5 are critical. Regardless, if they don't make the playoffs or with 9 home games, if you see New Orleans at 8-9 at the end of the year, there'll be a new head coach in 2025. That's my preview. That's my team series look at New Orleans. Coming back with just one more team back in about 15 minutes with the Tampa Bay Bucks. Thanks for watching this one. See you soon.